The ocean was calm, the water smooth like glass as it stretched beneath a painted sky. Kai moved his hand through the air, and a ribbon of water rose from the surface, twisting and swirling in response. He was one with it, feeling the currents, the depths, the strength of each pull and flow. It was his peace and his power, a rare combination that had carried him through every hardship he'd faced. But today, a storm brewed on the horizon, not in the sky, but in his mind. News had come of a new threat, someone who wielded powers that should have belonged to no one. Zarek, they called him, a man capable of controlling all the elements. Earth, air, fire, water, he held them all within his grasp, and he planned to use them to reshape the world. Kai let the water fall back into the sea. He couldn't face this alone, yet the thought of joining with others felt daunting. But when Elder Mora, the wise mentor of their village, had come to him, her words carried the weight of fate. "No single element can defeat him," she'd said, her voice grave yet filled with a glimmer of hope. "Only through unity can we stand a chance. Find them, Kai. Find the others." And so, he had set out, searching for the few like him, those who wielded the elements with power and skill. He traveled far, crossing mountains and deserts, forests and rivers, until he gathered 3 others who shared his rare gift. First, there was Lana, the fire wielder, a fierce and unpredictable force. Her power was raw, her temper hotter than her flames. She had met him with a blaze, testing him, challenging him before she finally agreed to join. She distrusted his calm nature, seeing it as a weakness. Then came Terra, the earth wielder. She was grounded and strong, a woman of few words but with a presence as unshakable as a mountain. She carried a quiet sadness, the weight of past battles fought and lost. She had hesitated before joining, wary of the fight ahead, but her loyalty to the world's balance won out. Finally, Arrow, the air wielder, completed their circle. He was light-hearted and carefree, using humor as a shield to hide his own fears. His power was tied to his emotions, and he often struggled to keep them in check, his control as fickle as a breeze. Yet, when he met Kai, he found something in his calmness that gave him courage. They gathered by the coast, where Kai called upon the waters to shield them from prying eyes. As they looked at each other, strangers bound by a shared purpose, it was clear that unity would not come easily. Lana folded her arms, her gaze sharp. "So, what's the plan, Kai? Or are we just going to stand here until Zarek turns us all to ash?" Kai met her gaze, refusing to let her fire consume him. "We need to train, to learn each other's strengths and weaknesses. Zarek has control of all elements. We have to work together to have any chance against him." Lana scoffed, a flicker of flame dancing in her palm. "I don't need training. I've faced worse than him." Terra's voice was steady, grounding the tension that had begun to crackle. "Perhaps. But this isn't about you alone, Lana. It's about all of us. Our powers aren't just weapons, they're parts of a whole. We need to understand that if we're to survive." Arrow grinned, but there was a hint of unease in his eyes. "Yeah, Lana, don't burn us all to a crisp just yet. I'd like to keep my hair intact." Kai allowed a small smile, though his mind was heavy with worry. He could feel the distrust and pride between them, the walls that would need to come down if they were to face Zarek together. But he didn't say anything. Instead, he raised his hand, calling forth a sphere of water that floated in the air before them. "We start here," he said. "With trust." One by one, they took turns displaying their abilities, testing each other's powers, learning how to blend and balance. At first, it was awkward, forced, as though each power rejected the others. Lana's fire flared too hot, nearly evaporating Kai's water. Terra's earth clashed with Eros' wind, scattering dust and stones. But over time, they began to find a rhythm, an unspoken language between their elements. Water cooled fire, fire hardened earth, earth steadied air. Each move became a dance, a cycle that fed and strengthened the whole, yet, even as they learned to work together, Kai felt the strain within himself. He was not as aggressive as Lana, not as unyielding as Terra, nor as agile as Aero. His power was subtle, a quiet force, and he feared it wasn't enough. Doubt began to creep in, whispering that he was a weak link, that he didn't belong among these powerful forces. The days passed in intense training, each session testing their endurance and resolve. Kai tried to keep his doubts hidden, but Lana's sharp gaze caught the smallest hints of his hesitation. "What's your deal, Kai?" she demanded one evening as they sat around a fire. The others were asleep, and the night was silent except for the gentle lapping of waves against the shore. Kai shrugged, avoiding her gaze. "I'm fine." "No, you're not." She poked at the fire, sending sparks into the air. "You're holding back. You think you're not strong enough." Kai looked at her, surprised by the insight. Lana's usual harshness was softened, her voice a rare blend of understanding and frustration. "Water isn't like fire," he murmured. "It's not explosive. It's quiet. And sometimes, it feels like that's a weakness." Lana's eyes softened, and for the first time, Kai saw beyond her fiery exterior. "Quiet doesn't mean weak, Kai. Water wears down mountains. It shapes continents. You have to believe in that power, or it'll never reach its full potential." He nodded, her words igniting a spark of confidence within him. But as the dawn approached, so did Zarek. Their training was cut short when they received news of Zarek's attack on a major city, his forces laying waste to buildings, his elemental powers sowing chaos in the streets. The team had no choice but to confront him, ready or not. As they approached the city, the air was thick with the smell of smoke and the echoes of crumbling stone. Zarek stood in the heart of it all, his hands raised, flames swirling around him, gusts of wind driving the fires higher. Kai's heart pounded as he met the villain's gaze. Zarek was a figure of raw power, his control over the elements effortless, terrifying. The team moved as one, each launching their own attack, a blend of water, fire, earth, and air, striking from all sides. But Zarek merely laughed, his powers combining to form a shield that deflected their every move. Lana charged forward, flames blazing around her fists. Terra sent a wave of rocks hurtling at him, while Aero whipped up a cyclone to trap him. But Zarek met them with a brutal force, his control shifting seamlessly from one element to another, each attack blending into a relentless assault. Kai tried to hold his ground, his water clashing with Zarek's fire, but the villain's power overwhelmed him. In an instant, he felt the heat sear through him, sending him sprawling to the ground, gasping for breath. He saw Lana fall beside him, her flames extinguished, and Aero crumpled under the weight of a stone that Zarek had hurled at him. Defeated, the team retreated, barely escaping with their lives. The city lay in ruins behind them, and the weight of failure settled heavily on Kai's shoulders. The others were battered and bruised, their morale shattered. As they limped away, Lana turned on him, fury blazing in her eyes. "This was your plan, Kai? To get us killed? We're not ready for this." Kai could feel his own anger rising, but it was laced with guilt. She was right, he hadn't been able to lead them to victory. He had underestimated Zarek's power and overestimated his own. Elder Mora appeared that night, her expression somber but resolute. She spoke to them softly, reminding them that their powers were not just tools, but parts of a greater whole. She told them stories of water carving stone, fire giving life, air carrying life, and earth providing strength. It was a lesson Kai took to heart, finding within it the core of his purpose. He realized that while his power might not be as explosive, it was resilient, adaptive, capable of withstanding and shaping the force around it, and so, Kai rose, determination hardening in his heart. He looked at his team, their eyes weary but holding a glimmer of hope. They would fight again, stronger, wiser, and united. Together, they would face Zarek, not as individuals, but as a force woven from the essence of the world itself. Kai's realization of his purpose brought a newfound sense of strength, a calm resolve that rippled through him like the steady pull of a tide. He knew now that his role wasn't to be the most aggressive force but the balance, the glue that could unify their power. With Elder Mora's guidance, the team resumed their training, but this time, there was a shift. They were no longer just wielding their elements in isolation, they were learning to move as one, their powers complementing each other rather than competing. Kai's connection with Lana deepened as he helped her see the power of control over raw force. She was fire incarnate, but under his calm direction, she found a way to temper her flames without losing their intensity. Arrow learned to let his emotions flow with the wind rather than resisting them, turning his fear into strength. And Terra, silent and steady, taught them all the importance of patience and precision, reminding them that power was most effective when it was deliberate. Their training became a dance, each element feeding into the other. Kai felt the doubts slipping away as he grew more attuned to the rhythm of their combined power. He was no longer a passive force but the calm center, directing each move with a quiet confidence that filled the others with trust. They were becoming a team, not just allies brought together by circumstance, but a unified whole with a single purpose. And then, the day of reckoning arrived. News reached them that Zarek had moved on to another city, this time threatening to devastate an entire region if his demands were not met. The team set out immediately, each step resonating with the shared understanding that this was their last chance. They couldn't afford to fail again. The journey to the city was silent, each member of the team focused, drawing strength from the earth, the air, the fire, and the water around them. Kai felt a deep calm settle over him, a confidence that extended beyond his own power. It was a feeling of unity, of purpose, that he had never known before. As they approached the city, the scene before them was one of pure destruction. Buildings lay in ruins, streets flooded with debris, and flames crackled from the remains of what had once been homes. Zarek stood at the heart of it all, his hands raised, a storm of elements swirling around him in a terrifying display of power. His eyes glowed with a fierce, unstoppable confidence, his presence a dark promise of absolute control, but Kai wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Without hesitation, he signaled to the others, and they spread out, forming a circle around Zarek. This time, there was no hesitance, no doubt. They moved as one, each element flowing seamlessly into the other as they launched their first attack. Kai sent a wave of water spiraling toward Zarek, a carefully controlled stream that circled him, trapping him within a barrier. At the same time, Lana's fire shot through the water, turning it to steam and shrouding Zarek in a blinding mist. Zarek snarled, his power shifting to dispel the steam, but Terra was ready, her hands pressed to the ground as she summoned a wall of rock that rose up around him, closing in on all sides. Arrow added his own touch, whipping up a wind that swirled the dust and debris into a whirlwind, cutting off Zarek's vision and disorienting him, but Zarek was no ordinary enemy. With a roar, he unleashed a blast of power that shattered Terra's walls and sent Arrow's wind scattering. He was powerful, unyielding, his mastery over the elements unmatched. But Kai could see the strain, the tiny cracks in Zarek's control. The more he used each element, the less focused he became, his attention divided between maintaining control and countering their attacks. Kai sensed his opening. Summoning every ounce of his power, he directed a surge of water at Zarek, dousing the flames that had sprung up around him. Lana followed with a concentrated blaze, heating the water to create another shroud of steam that obscured Zarek's vision. Terra used the cover to send a wave of rock and dirt toward him, catching him off guard and knocking him off balance. For a brief moment, Zarek faltered, his control slipping. Kai didn't hesitate. He called to the others, and together, they launched a combined attack, each element weaving into the other in a seamless harmony. The water cooled the earth, hardening it around Zarek's legs, trapping him. Fire and wind combined to create a vortex of heat that surrounded him, draining his energy, forcing him to split his focus. Zarek fought back with everything he had, but Kai could see the desperation in his eyes, the cracks widening in his power. They had found his weakness. He was spread too thin, trying to maintain control over all elements without truly understanding any of them. Kai knew then that Zarek's power was not a strength but a flaw, a fractured force that lacked the unity their own team had forged. With a final surge of energy, Kai unleashed a torrent of water that crashed down on Zarek, extinguishing his flames and driving him to his knees. Terra reinforced the ground beneath him, locking him in place, while Eros wind swirled around him, cutting off any escape. Lana stepped forward, her flames crackling with controlled fury as she raised her hands, ready to deliver the final blow, but Kai held up a hand, stopping her. "He's beaten," he said, his voice steady. "We don't need to destroy him. His power is fractured. He's no threat anymore." Zarek looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of anger and despair. For the first time, Kai saw the man behind the power, a man who had been consumed by his ambition, who had sought control but lost himself in the process. It was a fate Kai had almost succumbed to, a path he now knew he would never take. Together, they bound Zarek, stripping him of his power and sealing it within the earth, water, fire, and air, each element taking a piece of it, dispersing it into the world where it could no longer be used for harm. Zarek was taken into custody, his once terrifying presence now reduced to a shadow of its former self. As they stood amidst the ruins of the city, a sense of quiet triumph settled over them. They had won, not just against Zarek, but against their own doubts and fears. They had forged a bond that went beyond their powers, a unity that gave each of them strength beyond measure. Kai looked at his team, his friends, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. He had found his place, his purpose, not as the strongest or the fiercest, but as the calm center that held them together. He knew now that water's true strength lay not in its force, but in its adaptability, its quiet resilience. The city would rebuild, life would go on, and they would continue to protect the balance they had fought so hard to preserve. As they parted ways, each returning to their own lives, Kai knew that they would always be connected, their powers woven together in a tapestry of trust and unity, and if the world ever needed them again, they would be ready.